I said we'll stop talking about politics for a week and take a break, but that was actually a lie. So we're talking about politics again. But you guys will love this. Don't worry. So I rolled a bunch of uh, politics stories together, and I think that it's a pretty open like kind of field where you guys can kind of pick and choose which one you want to respond to. But let's jump in. So. Um, the first kind of story is Kamala Harris's Polymarket odds. Polymarket, in case you guys don't know what that is, it's a betting market, right? You can bet with crypto, you can bet with stable coins and stuff on Polymarket. It's basically like if you think something is going to happen, it's like all of like the people who are actually putting the money where their mouth is, right? So if you think Kamala is going to win, like it's people who are actually willing to bet real money on that happening, or vice versa for Trump, right? So Polymarket, as people are saying, is a more accurate measure than the polls, because the polls, it's like it doesn't cost you anything to say like who you're going to vote for, and you can easily change. But if you bet like $100 on somebody winning, you're probably not going to change your mind, because like why would you vote against your $100, right? So Polymarket was showing Kamala Harris leading Trump by as much as 10%, just as early as last week. So I think it was like 55 Kamala Harris, 45% Trump. But after since last week, we've got the news that Kamala has announced a bunch of controversial economic proposals, which we'll get into. And because of that, her Polymarket odds have dropped, and now Trump is ahead again. So the latest is well, when I took the screenshot, it was 52 to 47, 52 in favor of Trump. But now I think it's like even higher. It's like 53% Trump and 46% Harris. So like Trump went up another percent and Harris dropped another percent. So it's like a 6 point or 6 to 7 point lead with Trump now on Polymarket. So uh, he went from being down 10% to being up 6 to 7%. So a dramatic swing for sure. So what are these policies, or what are these like? What are the causes of why Kamala has dropped so much? She proposed a bunch of policies that were not received well. So what are some of these policies? Well, number one is tackling price gouging. So she's blaming the corporations for inflation, basically, and she's saying that we're gonna like clamp down on these corporations that are raising their prices to gouge consumers. Basically, like it's a fancier way of saying price controls. It's basically price controls. Like how else are you gonna tackle so-called corporate greed and stuff? Like you just like make inflation illegal, basically, right? Like you control the prices. Say bread should never be more than $3 a loaf, and I'm gonna like put a price cap on it, and you can never charge more than $3 a loaf for bread. So price controls is number one. She's proposing raising the corporate tax rate from 21%, where it is now, to 28%. And she's proposing on raising the capital gains tax rate to 44.6%, which is the highest in like decades, if I recall correctly, if it were to happen. And she's proposing a 25% tax on unrealized gains for people who have $100 million or more of assets. So this is being sold as like, you don't have to worry about this if you have less than $100 million of assets, which is 99.99% of people, right? So it's only going to be like the 0.001% of the top richest people that's going to be affected. But we'll talk about why that might be problematic as well, even if it only directly affects super ultra rich people. But basically, that's kind of this first part of this story, as to like explain why Kamala Harris has dropped so much in Polymarket, or perhaps you guys would have a different opinion or a different reason why. But the fact that her odds have dropped, is undisputed fact. Now, the second part of this story is RFK, right? Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who if you guys recall, he's the nephew of JFK, the one who was assassinated, and he's running for president. He was running for president under the Democratic ticket, but the Democrats tried like all their tricks in the book to block him because they think like they didn't want him to go against Joe Biden and now Kamala Harris, right? And he got frustrated basically because he's getting railroaded by the Democratic Party. So he dropped out of the Democratic nomination process and continued to run for president as an independent. Now, recently, his polling numbers have been dropping as well. So he was polling at over 10% at one point, but now he's dropped to like around 5% national support. So um, he's getting to the point where it's like he's just burning money and wasting money, and he's running out of money by continuing to stay in the race. So the rumor is that we're recording this on Thursday night, but the rumor is that on Friday, which is tomorrow, he's going to announce at an event in Phoenix, Arizona, which is near where Trump is holding a similar event. But RFK is going to announce at his event in Arizona that he's dropping out of the race, and he's the second part of the rumor is that not only is he dropping out, he's going to endorse Donald Trump. Now, this came as a maybe as a shock to some people who are not. It didn't come as a shock to me, but it came as a shock to some people who might not have been paying attention to U.S. politics because RFK, like the Kennedys, are like one of the most famous families in the Democratic Party, right? They're like almost like the royal family of the United States and like veterans of the Democratic Party. So for RFK to drop out and endorse the Republican candidate, it just goes to show how much of a falling out and how much of like a dispute there is between RFK and the Democratic Party as a whole. But that is the rumor. It's not like it's like confirmed by like ABC News and like a bunch of other news, but it's not like fully confirmed because we didn't hear the speech yet. The speech is tomorrow, but I think it's pretty clear that it's going to happen. And in fact, Polymarket predicts. Well, by the time I took the screenshot, it was 85%. I bet it's even higher now that RFK will drop out of the race. Those are the two parts of the politics news that I wanted to kind of cover. So my question to you guys is, on the first part, what do you think of Kamala's policies, like price controls, raising the corporate tax, raising capital gains tax, and specifically like touch upon taxing unrealized gains? Do you think that that's a great idea or that's a bad idea? Like, what are your thoughts on that? And then the second part, what are your thoughts on the whole like RFK situation? Do you think that this is gonna like make a difference? Do you think that it's gonna like help Trump? And what are your thoughts on like him as a candidate, his and his campaign as a whole? So bit of an open field, a lot of questions. Uh, Start wherever you want.
Sure. Okay, I'll give it a go. I think the biggest thing for me is that 25% tax on unrealized gains. It's the fact that it's not even gains that you've, sold or like provided yourself into cash. I think that's the most surprising. I know it's like for like the 1% of the US population, but I still think that's pretty insane and unfair to those like 1% individuals. And I think it's just going to leave money, that used to be in the States is going to find its way somewhere else into another area because if you tax these ridiculous taxes on these rich people that are like providing a lot of income and money to like the American economy and society, that money might go away and it might go somewhere else, and that in the end actually might not be good like for the future of the American economy. So I don't like really agree with that. um and in terms of like the polling, I think it's interesting how it's pretty close, and the whole thing with RFK potentially dropping out is pretty interesting too as well. I don't know how much impact he'll have if he like endorses Trump because I think, for example, California and New York will still be stuck in or like blue ways. Like I don't know if that alone can, sway their decision any differently. I know a lot of the other states are pretty red, like the upper north, like Dakotas, whatever, they're always gonna be red. But maybe perhaps I'd see like California, like Chicago and like New York needing a little more than just like a person like endorsing Trump for it to change a bit. But um I mean who knows? I could be wrong. So maybe things might change. But yeah, that's all I have to say.
I think Tristan might be frozen, so we'll give him a sec to fix that. In the meantime, I guess I'll go next, just to mix up the order a bit. So yeah, the unrealized gains tax part. I think that that is a horrible idea, and it's like one of the worst economic ideas I've ever heard in my life. And the reason is that, well, okay, first of all, there's no way to determine like a fair price of what your unrealized gain actually is. And what I mean by that is that, let's say if I like, if I, buy a house, right? And then I paid like $1 million for a house. But then like, who's to say how much this house is actually worth until like I'm able to sell the house, right? Like, what if like a government appraiser and like, it- somebody who's tasked with determining how much the house is so that they can tax you, they would always have an incentive to like say that it's worth higher than it actually is, right? So if I buy a house for $1 million and then somebody comes in from the IRS or from the government, and they say, I think your house is worth $10 million," and it doesn't matter that the house down the street from you sold for 2 million. I think your house is worth 10 million because like your house looks nicer than the one that's down the street. Then do I owe taxes on the basis that it's worth $10 million, even though I haven't sold anything, right? Like, and I don't have the cash, right? Because like unrealized gains are ethereal, like they don't exist, and they only get like they only come into existence when you sell it, right? When you make the transaction. So if the government person says your house is actually worth $10 million, so I was like, oh crap, then like I can't disprove them, right? Or I guess I can disprove them by actually selling my house. But what if I like don't want to sell my house because like I know that like the government person says it's worth 10 million, but maybe like if I actually try to sell it on the market is worth like $900,000, I'd actually lose 100K if I sold the house. But like in order to prove the like our IRS agent wrong, I'd have to like actually sell my house, right? So like this idea just doesn't make sense because like who's to say how much your unrealized gain actually is? And I know another like argument that I've seen online is that people are saying, "Oh, it's only gonna. Why do you care, right? Like, do you have $100 million? Like, all the people that are complaining are people who don't have $100 million, and this is only going to affect the ultra rich." Let me give you kind of a background on a situation that happened in 1913 in America. So this is when they introduced the income tax for the first time. By the way, did you know that there was no income tax in America for like the first like 100 or so years of its existence, right? So like that wasn't a thing like back in the day when the founding fathers like established the country. But they introduced the income tax, and back then it was $20,000. Like you'd have to pay taxes, you'd have to pay income tax at 1% marginal rate, starting at $20,000. Now, $20,000 back then is worth in 2015 dollars $480,000. So, and, it's you can argue it's still on the high end, like not like a lot of households make $480,000 per year, but like this is what I'm saying, right? Like it seems like it's a thing that only affects the ultra wealthy, but like if they kept the 1% like marginal tax rate at $20,000, eventually inflation would have caught up, and like they don't have to like change the brackets. You would like grow into the brackets because of inflation. Like you get what I mean, right? So like they're saying that this is only going to affect the 100 million centimillionaires, But then like either the dollar gets inflated so much that like everyone becomes a centimillionaire because like the US dollar got printed to oblivion, or they just like they lower the requirements, like they lower the threshold slowly over time, right? So, this year it's only going to be 100 if you have $100 million. Next year is going to be, you only have like you'd qualify, you'd have to pay for the tax if you have $90 million, or like they will find ways to lower it later, right? So um, we don't want to open that Pandora's box of unrealized gains, is what I'm saying. Otherwise, like you just have to pay taxes because the government said you made a gain, and like it's just there's no way you can disprove them, right? It's just like a one-sided thing where I think you made a gain, and you can't disprove me, so therefore you owe taxes. So I think that like this is why it's such a bad idea, and it opens up a box that you can't close. And I don't want to make this overly political, but the fact that the government can say something and then seize your assets, where do we see that elsewhere in the world, right? We see these in authoritarian countries, where the government can just arbitrarily seize your assets. And again, like, don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but this is often a feature of hard left socialist regimes. So just putting that out there. But you guys can disagree with that if you want, but this is just my opinion. So that's number one, and number two, with RFK dropping out, I think that this is kind of like inevitable. So it's been a long time coming, and I do think that, like, as you guys know, I said like ideologically I align with RFK the most out of like the three major candidates, Trump, Harris, and RFK, right? But uh, yeah, unfortunately, his campaign just didn't pick up any steam, and it just like he just didn't get traction, right? Like, there's multiple reasons we can analyze as to why exactly he didn't pick up traction, but we have to face the music that he didn't. So I think it's the right thing to do for him to drop out because um, acting as a spoiler candidate, and like getting people to like vote for a third party that's not going to win, it just makes it more likely for like certain outcomes to happen that otherwise would not have happened, right? So for example, like, and then this goes for both sides. Let's say you're a Harris supporter and you really hate Trump. Well then, like, a spoiler candidate can work against Harris at times because again, he used to be a Democrat, right? But then, like, you can also make the argument that maybe it'll hurt Trump more because, like, a lot of people who are agreeing with RFK, they're like saying that RFK actually aligns more with Trump. So if RFK stays in the race, then a lot of people might vote for RFK instead of Trump, and then that makes a Harris victory more likely, which is probably not what you want if you're supportive of Trump. And I know this is like a big debate in the Bitcoin space as well, where RFK is seen as the more pro Bitcoin candidate, but because Trump is uh, like leading in the polls and RFK is not getting traction, like, and Trump has said some pro Bitcoin things, although not as much as RFK. The consensus is that Trump is a lot better than Harris in terms of the potential to support Bitcoin and pass pro Bitcoin legislation. So yeah, I just think that like it's gone to the point where like this election. I know they say this about every election, but this election is incredibly consequential to the future of America. And I just think that if we fumble the ball at this critical moment, and then elect a certain candidate, which again, I'm not going to name that person out of, respect, and out of, you know, not letting the comment section blow up into a huge firestorm. But I just think that, in my opinion, it's so like consequential that if you elect the wrong person to be the president, then it's going to be a big disaster. So I do support RFK's decision to drop out. if that does end up being what he's going to do. So that's just my opinion. Now, let me pass it to Tristan for your thoughts.
I do want to hammer on that unrealized gains piece a little bit more, because it's monumentally stupid. Unless you're going to give me a 25% tax rebate on my losses, and then we're just going to arbitrarily take that at different points. And even then, I don't know how the hell you'd calculate that. It just seems like a complete meme and a half to try and figure out, right? Like, for example, if you had a portfolio, even if they say I'm just going to use smaller numbers, but even if they say it's only for 100 million, say you have a portfolio that's worth $100,000. Your portfolio shoots up in value. It's now $150,000. Congratulations, you've done great. Now you have $50,000. If we're now taxing on that unrealized gains, you now owe money on that $50,000, $10,000 to $2,500. But then say your portfolio tanks $70,000. Now you're down to $80,000. Where do I get taxed? Do I get taxed at the time where my portfolio is worth $150,000, but now it's worth $80,000? Like the whole question of how you're going to tax these unrealized gains is like ridiculous, because who decides when your portfolio is actually worth XYZ amount of money, right? And if you actually wanted to cause a real degree of change on that front, maybe you could look at taxing if someone is taking out debt against their investments or something to that effect. But like, by taxing the unrealized gains itself, you're going to be basically doing a completely arbitrary assessment of their portfolio at any given time and trying to determine a value from it that is going to be essentially arbitrary. And I think that route is just frankly going to just increase government bureaucracy and just cause a whole mess in order to try and collect this amount of money that is completely nebulous and impossible to pin down. And by the time you've figured out how much someone should owe you, the odds that person has figured out a great way to leave the country without being taxed or move the money to someplace that you cannot tax it from is very high. So at that point, why are you bothering? Because it just feels like it's going to generate such a monumental amount of effort to get an amount of money that frankly is completely arbitrary. So like, how much money are you going to get? I just feel like it's just a complete waste of time. It's like it's all there to signal to the poor or people that this is going to be, this is going to help you, when in reality it's just it can't. It has no basis in fact that this is something that can be used to actually target these individuals who are having all this wealth, and a lot of them in essence aren't doing much with it, right? The strategy for taxing that is not through taxing unrealized gains. It's just, it just makes no sense to me, because also, what time frame are you using? Are we looking at the time frame of this annual year? What if my portfolio was up this year, but last year was down? Like, it's just so completely arbitrary. Like, what if I have $100,000 portfolio? Okay, it's gone down every year except for this year. So it's now down from 100,000 to 50,000. And say I make $10,000 this year. Woohoo! Now I'm being taxed on that $10,000? Is that what we're saying? I've lost $40,000. Like, it just makes no sense to me. just across the board. I just
Yeah, and a lot of people are saying how, like, I totally agree with everything you just said, by the way, and a lot of people are saying how this idea is like totally un-American, and I would even go a step further. It's just like we're like a group of Canadians right now. It's like it's un-Canadian as well, right? Like it's un like I don't know, like it's anti-liberty or is anti like
I,
prosperity, I guess I would say, because it's like you're punishing people for winning, but then you're not giving them a break when they lose, right? So like as you said, like if your portfolio went down and it's a paper loss, they're not going to give you a credit for that. But if your portfolio goes up and you haven't even realized the gains, it's just a paper win, then they're already like pressing the tax button and punishing you for that.
yeah. And I think actually I would say that I would use harsher language than you're saying with regards to the like it being anti-liberal or anti-Canadian. I think it's just completely nonsensical. Like I think it has no logic to it. It is completely unobtainable, or if it is obtainable, it's going to be moronically obtainable. And because of that fact, it's a complete waste of breath for them to have it in their platform, because it is going to provide no value to anyone anywhere. And all it's going to do is convince more people to leave the country who have lots of money, or just move the money elsewhere. So it's completely it's not even anti-libertarian or anything. Well, maybe it is, but like that's not even the point that I'm really hammering on. For me, it's just stupid. It's just completely illogical. It has no practical route to it being a valuable investment of all the billions of dollars that it's going to take to build a bureaucracy to try and receive this money.
Yeah, no, I would go even a step further. It's like not only does it have no value, it has negative value, right? Like it makes things more difficult and it just makes everything worse. It's not that it doesn't provide value for the people. It doesn't, but it's worse than that. It makes everything worse. So like this is what I'm saying. Like, I've been called like being hyperbolic. I've been called like being alt right when I say that this is like the one of the most consequential elections that America's had for a long time. I don't know if I would say it's the most consequential election ever, but it's definitely one of the most consequential elections in a long time. And I just don't think people realize that, right? So like when Kamala became the presumptive nominee, she rode this wave of like good vibes. Like that's why she was surging in the polls, because like face it, like she's only at that point she's only done scripted interviews and just scripted speeches and stuff like that, and basically that's all it took for her to rise in the polls and overcome Trump in terms of the averages, especially in battleground states, right? And then her first wave of actual policy proposals, we get like these dumb ideas, like we talked about price controls last week, so that's like part of her platform as well. She didn't call it price controls, she calls it cracking down on corporate price gouging, which is like, again, as I said, a fancier way to say price controls. And the 25% unrealized gains tax on like the ultra wealthy. Like as I said, it doesn't matter that you're like only targeting the ultra wealthy. Like this, like once you open that box, like you can't close it again, right? So um yeah, her first wave of economic policies are already like this. So I can't imagine what she's gonna be like if she actually becomes president. And maybe thankfully, like it looks like the Republicans are gonna are gonna take over the Senate. So maybe like she won't actually get to implement a lot of these policies. But like if she was given her way, right? Like if the Democrats sweep, then there's like a really good chance that a lot of this is actually going to come into reality, and you're going to see the full effect of exactly what happens when you like just raise taxes on like everyone and everything, and spend money like crazy. And like people are calling me like alt right or hyperbolic, or when I say like this is the most consequential election ever. but it's like, look, these are policies that are actually like in her platform. This, like, for once, it's not just like the crazy like Alex Jones people saying that, oh, like they're putting the the chemicals in the water to make the frogs gay. It's like, it's not that type of stuff anymore, right? Like, this is legit, like what the Democrats are proposing, and they're asking for your vote, so that they can make this stuff happen. And I just, like, again, I don't want to get too political, because I said that, like, because I've already gotten political enough in the previous few episodes in the past few weeks. But it's just like, how could anyone actually take this seriously when this is the kind of economic policies that they're proposing, and we're in one of the most like dire economic times, right? Like, I know officially the government has not announced that we're in a recession or anything, but like, let's face it, like, this is one of the worst like economic times. If you try to like go find a job right now, like, you can't, and it's like there's people getting laid off, and there's just like people using like food banks and food kitchens and stuff like that, like at record highs. Housing is skyrocketing. Like, we have all these problems, economic problems, and then the Democrats come out with this. It's ridiculous. But yeah, we're running out of time. Tristan, do you want to add some final thoughts on the RFK thing, and then we'll wrap up?
I think that it makes a lot of sense for him to drop out, because I think that splitting the vote to any degree in this kind of scenario is not really in his favor. So I think that regardless of who he wants, I think that having him in the race is not really providing much value at this point. So I think that it makes a lot of sense for him to drop out and put his backing behind whoever he is most aligned with.